So hey guys, welcome back to my channel. And for those of you who are new, this channel is all about psychology content. And while I started off talking about the Myers-Briggs type indicator that was, based on Carl Jung's principles, I also venture out into Sigmund Freud, Carl Jung's idea of the unconscious mind, and all other really interesting psychology concepts, and a little bit of Freud as well. So welcome back to my channel. And today we are going to be touching on the topic of the individuation process, which is a very famous process that Carl Jung himself came up with, and he famously also talked about in his book Men and His Symbols. And I'm actually holding a book club on Men and His Symbols, both in person and online. In person is for people who live in Los Angeles, and online I do a Patreon, so make sure to sign up. Link in the description box below. And I'm going to be giving you a brief summary of Carl Jung's individuation process, including what it means, how you can apply it in your own life, and just the relevance, the very important relevance to today's world, today's hugely divided and fragmented society that we see. So to start off, this is a very popular topic that I ran a poll on my channel page and most people voted for it. And what is the individuation process, you may ask? The individuation process includes this idea of integration of your shadow self and coming to a more whole and authentic version of yourself. So rather than being about self-improvement, being about a better version of yourself, this is actually more about self-realization and self-discovery. Because according to Jung, a lot of our aspects of ourselves, like the more natural aspects of ourselves, are actually eroded in the process of socialization. Like when we were growing up, because of maybe family dynamics, maybe culture, maybe repression, suppression of the self that happens through what is acceptable and what isn't. So this causes us to actually play small and be a different version of ourselves, and therefore we are actually unable to be the fullest version of what we can be, and we are unable to reach our greatest potential. So how do we discover who we truly are beyond the ego identity, right? So Carl Jung talks about the ego-driven personality, and that is where most of us, if not all of us, start out with, right? We are very much in our ego. We are very much in our persona, also known as the social mask, right? We kind of act the way that we think will get us the most likes. We act the way that we think will get us the most validation based on where we live, based on how people around us respond to. So when you go from social mask and ego-driven personality to your true self with a capital S, that is the individuation process. In summary, okay. So this can actually happen by chance, right? Most people become a fuller version of themselves through just spontaneous life experiences. However, you can also quicken the process by actively engaging with your unconscious so that it doesn't take as long as decades, right? For some people, they have to go through quarter life crisis, midlife crisis, in order to finally maybe, when they are 60 or 70, to realize who they really are. And some people never really get to that, right? So we can actually accelerate it by being conscious and by acting and being aware of our unconscious sides. So there are several ways to individuate, right? And there is a famous saying that all conflicts are actually conflicts of the self. And this is another, of one of famous principles or guiding principles of Carl Jung's theory is when you look at the world and you see a lot of conflicts, whether that is interpersonal conflicts like the gender war or like political conflicts, right? Or conflicts with our neighbors, conflicts with our friends and our, partners. All these are actually originating from conflicts of the self, which means that most of us, if not all of us, right, we have issues that we have not looked into, unresolved, and therefore we either project on others or others project onto us, like mutually, right? And so that actually causes us to act out these conflicts in real life. Whereas the more aware we are of our own unconscious sides, the less we actually go into conflicts because we know that this other person is just reflecting a shadow aspect of ourselves. So conflict is actually one of the ways to individuate because when we realize we often conflict with someone, a certain type of person, we can actually see what is it in them that we are so annoyed by, right? One of the ways to discover our shadow side, which is part of what we have repressed and disowned within ourselves, is to look at what kind of person or personality do we often have conflicts with. So this can be personalities that just get under our skin for no reason or that we tend to judge. So for example, my friend and I were having a conversation the other day, right? We were talking about how there was this guy that we knew many years ago, and we call him the critic, right? Because he really liked criticizing the women that he dates. And we were like, oh my God, this guy, is so terrible to be around. He's always criticizing, and why is he doing that? And then while we were talking about him, we got into another conversation of how in the past, both of us actually had a tendency to assume things about other people and judge them and then find out that, oh, this person actually was not the way that we thought he was. So what that meant was by realizing that this guy who is like deemed the critique was being really critical about other people, we also realized that we in our past were doing the same thing as him, right? It's just that we were not consciously doing that. And maybe there is a degree difference. Yes, he probably went like a lot further than we did, but still the same thing is, the conclusion is that we have the same problem as that guy that we were realizing, right, was being super critical of other people. And we sort of had the shadow that we are now fully aware and therefore able to stop ourselves from, going any further, right? So other examples can be just any kind of personality trait that you find often gets under your skin, okay? So I used to judge people for being bossy. I used to judge people for being lazy. And that can be, a recycling of my parents' judgments. It can be a recycling of societal judgment. But it's also like a part of my own judgment of myself, right? So there is a part of me that wants to lead, that wants to have the final say, that wants to do things my own way. And by judging people who are bossy, it's actually a projection because they have something that I want to be. And of course, there is an unhealthy form of leadership, and that's something you have to be aware about. But it is also true that something about them, right, is reflecting back to me about myself and what I have yet to realize. And the same thing can be said about lazy people or people who just seem to enjoy life, people who are very chill, people who are maybe a little too laid back. But there is a part of me that wants to do that. There's a part of me that wants to kind of let it go, that wants to enjoy life, that wants to find a way to have a life where I can enjoy more things and not be consumed by massive responsibilities all the time. So there's always an aspect of you in the judgment of other people that most people are not willing to look at because it is very triggering, right? It is very scary to associate yourself with the people that you don't like. But a lot of times you realize people who end up like being enemies, people who end up fighting a lot, as an outsider, sometimes you can even see they actually have more similarities than differences. Like, have you ever seen two people in intense conflict? When you are the third party, it's actually clearer because you're not involved, right? You can actually see, oh, this person is doing this other person, and they're kind of mirroring each other, right? But when you are the participant, it's harder to see. So that is one way, actually a super effective way to individuate, is to realize how you behave in conflicts, the type of people you have conflicts with, and truly look at the similarities between you and that person, or you and a certain type of person. Another way to individuate is through dream interpretations. So this is another concept in Carl Jung's book Men and His Symbols. He talks about how our dream is actually a portal to our unconscious mind. So a lot of times when you dream, the dreams that you can remember are the ones that will be useful, because obviously if you already forgot the content, then it's not going to be very helpful in helping you realize like what you can work on, right? So when you are, an amateur in dream analysis, which most of us are, what you want to do is you want to think about the dreams that you can remember, especially recurring dreams, vivid dreams. You write them down, and then you kind of look at the dreams and look at your own life. So Carl Jung talks about the importance of looking at your own life as a basis of the dream, because a lot of people will interpret the dreams in very symbolic ways that is not related to the dreamer. So, for example, the same symbol can appear in two different people's dreams and mean exactly different things, completely different things, because it's different people dreaming the same thing, right? So, for example, in your dream, you can be picturing yourself flying, and it could be related to something that recently happened or a concern that you have about, being too out there, and going beyond, right, what you usually do, and kind of soaring above, right, and exceeding your own expectations, and therefore making yourself nervous. But in another person's dream, flying can actually mean they're super happy about something, because maybe they had a recent promotion, maybe they had a recent marriage that they're super excited about. So every person's dream is different because the person experiencing the dream is different, and how you feel during the dream and afterwards, it's also a huge sign. Like if you feel anxious during the dream, if you feel scared during the dream, that's usually what it represents, right? There is a certain hidden fear or anxiety, and then you can trace back to your real life and kind of do a little bit of, unmapping, or do a little bit of guesswork onto what the dream symbolizes and what it represents for you to look at. So for example, I had this, dream interpretation sort of book club, right? We were reading Men and His Symbols, and one of the woman in the book club talked about her dream where she was very overwhelmed at work, and she started having repeated dreams of basically accelerating, right, in a car, and she was stepping on the brakes, and then the brakes were not working, or she was stepping on them too slowly, and the car was going to careen off the cliff. So this dream, and when you like associate with the things going on in her real life, what she was experiencing was overwhelm, stress, over investment, right, in a workplace that didn't treat her well. And so the dream was actually basically a warning to pump the brakes before it's too late, before she would be flung off into the cliff, right? And so this is like kind of a metaphorical, right, warning. A lot of dreams are metaphorical warnings into what you can look at in your real life, and what areas of your life do you have to maybe pump the brakes, or do you have to reevaluate? Do you have to, think of new ways of doing things, right? So dream interpretation is super useful, a lost art in the modern life. Okay, this third way of individuation is also known as the Anima, Animus awareness. And if you don't know these terms, the Anima is the inner feminine in men, and the Animus is the inner masculine in women. Now, we as human beings, we have both feminine and masculine energies. That's perfectly normal. But we also have the sort of the opposite, right? So if we are a woman, most of us anyway, we would have an inner masculine. If you're a man, you will have an inner feminine. And the inner feminine and masculine can look very different for different people, because the inner feminine and masculine is usually a reality that is a combination of different things. It could be things that are passed down from us, from our parents. A lot of our inner masculine and inner feminine are based on what our parents tell us or what our parents demonstrate to us, right? So how do you realize when you are sort of in this unconscious element is when, again, you look at projection, you look at generalization. So if you look at the gender war today, for example, like, they are really coming from wounded sides, wounded parts of the self, right? Like women who have really bad experiences with their fathers, or with men like in their household, right? A lot of that is where it's coming from. And men who also, have terrible experiences with maybe the women in their household, or based on how their fathers treated their mothers, they are going to have these generalizations about men and women, which is really actually a reflection of their own inner masculine or inner feminine. And that's based on what they see growing up, right? So for example, if a man says, all women lie, or women are gold diggers, all women are out to get me and use me, that means it's a projection from their family dynamics, from how they see women, or from how, sometimes it also means how their own inner feminine is treating them, right? So we all have our inner masculine and inner feminine. So if their own inner feminine, meaning like they themselves, right, they are using themselves, maybe they are not taking care of themselves, they're not taking care of their own feminine, they are constantly working, so they are going to kind of project it on other people, right, saying that, oh, women are using them, but actually they are kind of doing that to themselves. And this can be also seen from the other angle with women who say, all men cheats, all men lie, all men want is one thing. What else do people say? Like men are, only out there to use you, right? Men are out there to manipulate you. And that again is coming from an inner wound. It's coming from a wounded inner masculine, right? So a lot of times it's because the men they grow up seeing, right, the men in their households are not treating them well, or treating the women in the family well, so they are projecting that onto the world. And that could also be their inner masculine. So inner masculine is sort of like your inner father, like how you experience the world, right? Whether you stand up for yourself, right? Whether you have structure in your life. And so when you don't stand up for yourself, what you experience is, oh my God, people are taking advantage of me, right? Or, oh my God, people are doing this and doing that to me. But it's really also a reflection of a weak inner masculine because you are not having that level of stability and boundaries and assertiveness within yourself. So this is another loaded subject, obviously, and this is not to invalidate any bad experiences that people have with either gender, but anytime you hear a very negative generalization, it comes from their own inner experience, family wise, personal development wise, and this is not a reflection of how everybody is, because the world has billions of people, right? So your experience is always a reflection of something going on within yourself primarily, and any other factors outside of you, of course there can be contributing factors, but it's a reflection of inner conflict first and foremost. Okay, so going off that whole loaded subject, I'm going to talk about another controversial subject, which is the political shadow. So you cannot do individuation work without confronting your political shadow. And I know this is not what people want to hear. Same with the gender war. This is a very controversial subject, but you kind of have to listen to this, because the way that the world is going right now, it's really just extremes and extremes, like extremists meeting extremists. That's what is going on right now. And this is why the world is in such a terrible shape, is in conflict all the time, is because two sides, right? There's no such thing as two sides when it comes to politics or any categorization, right? Because the opposites are always going to be a reflection of each other in some ways. It's kind of like the same thing with MBTI types, right? You think extroverts and introverts are opposites, and the judging and the perceiving are opposites. But no, they need each other, right? They are looking for each other in an unconscious way, and they are looking to activate that part of what they lack within themselves. And the same thing with political divides, right? What people don't realize is people tend to project negative qualities onto their opponents when they are unable to face their own shadow. So what I mean is, when you are unable to see yourself as a flawed person, as someone who could be manipulated, as someone who could have a wrong answer about something, you are going to project these qualities completely onto the other side, no matter which side you're on, right? You're going to say, my political opponents are ignorant, my political opponents are easily manipulated, they are evil, they are full of problems. But the reality is that every single human being in this world is capable of being manipulated, is capable of doing evil, is capable of making the wrong judgment. It doesn't really matter which side of the political spectrum you are on. We are all capable of evil. We are all capable of a lapse in critical thinking. But if you are not able to confront that and acknowledge that we are all capable of doing that, what happens is you are going to put all the negative qualities onto the other side, so that it absolves you of your own responsibility, so that it absolves you of all accountability. And this is what both sides are doing, by the way. In any form of conflict, in any form of political conflict, you will see that both sides are on equal measure, most of the time, doing the same thing to each other. They are demonizing each other. They are making blanket statements about each other. They are not truly trying to understand what each other is saying most, if not all the time. And social media is exacerbating this problem by only showing us what we want to see. So we never see people as human beings. We only see them as a caricature. And I talked about it in my short videos, that when you see your political opponents as caricatures, that's when you are not aware of your own shadow. Because people are human beings, if you like it or not, even if you disagree with them, even if there are serious policy disagreements. people are still human beings at the end of the day. And a lot of times, if you talk to them long enough, you will realize you will agree on some things. Even with the ones that are seemingly on the opposite ends of the spectrum. And believe me, I've tried to argue, I've tried all things. But at the end of the day, you will realize there's always going to be something you will agree on, either in principle or in practice. But most people are not able to acknowledge that because it triggers their own idea of who they are, right? We want to think that we are the good ones and the other side is the evil, dumb, unintelligent ones. But really, human beings, we are all fallible people. We are all capable of destruction. We are all capable of controlling others and being manipulated. So part of shadow integration is really realizing that we are not innocent. We are not pure. Okay, we have all sides to us. We have the light and the dark. And that's not always a negative thing, right? It's only negative if you see it as negative, because there's always ways that you can transcend that once you are aware. Okay, so that's the political shadow aspect. And lastly, last but not least, the inferior function in MBTI terms, that's a very important and also very effective way to individuate. So we know that in the MBTI terms, we have inferior functions, right? So we have personal inferior functions. I'm an INFJ, so my inferior function is extroverted sensing, which means that if I'm not aware, I may struggle to take action. I may struggle to live in the moment. I may struggle to realize that life is not just about the destination, right? It's also about going with the flow. It's also about enjoying the moment. It's also about surrender. And these are the qualities that I am trying to actively integrate into my life. And this can be the same for other types, right? Depending on what your inferior functions are. For example, INFP, their inferior function is extroverted thinking. So that means they may struggle with structure, they may struggle with efficiency, productivity, having a routine. But there are going to be times in their lives where that is going to be tremendously helpful to them when it comes to making a life that's really, great for them, and that's really going to help them achieve what they want, right? And this is like different from everybody, right? Because we also have, types like ENTJ, right? And they also have inferior feeling as an inferior function, so they are going to struggle with, truly tapping into their own feelings, understanding the feelings of people around them, and approaching things from a more emotional perspective. And so ENTJs, if they completely neglect the introverted feeling aspect of themselves, they can put off a lot of people, right? They can lose a lot of business partners because of this reason. They can lose the support of their employees, even if they are amazing at their work, right? They can lose their family's support. So learning to see your inferior function as not an opposite end of the spectrum, but as something that can be useful, as something that can benefit you when you use it in a healthy way. It's very important to also note that inferior functions can be used either in a healthy way or in an unhealthy way, because some people go to the extreme ends where they either idealize or demonize their inferior functions, and that's kind of how we engage with the shadow aspects of ourselves in general. We either idealize or demonize, and either one is not the best way to integrate. When we talk about integration, we are talking about acknowledging the strengths that we already have, and then using aspects of our inferior function that's going to help us to improve the way that we live our lives. Finally, there is a cultural inferior function that I actually have a whole video on, so I encourage you to watch that video. That's basically talking about integrating the unconscious parts of yourself through your culture. So our culture is going to be a huge influence on how we act, right? Whatever our culture deem as unacceptable or make us, ashamed of, we are going to repress within ourselves. So, for example, my culture is very big on hyperproductivity. And so I actually had to repress my feelings for a long time, even though I am a feeling type, because of my culture. So for more details, you can watch that video, link down below, to discover what you can learn from your culture, not taking everything out, but also not accepting everything wholesale. Again, integration is about balance, right? Integration is about taking what you need, not throwing the baby out of bathwater, but also basically forming a more complete version of yourself through acknowledgement and acceptance of duality. So in conclusion, individuation is a unique yet universal process. That means that even though we all have an individuation process, it's going to take place at different times of our lives. It's going to take place with different triggers, with different events, and we all experience it, but it's different for everybody because we are all unique individuals and we all have our own time. We all have to respect the unique pacing and circumstances of our lives that will bring us to who we really are. And sometimes it's not a good way to rush things. Sometimes you do have to, just propel yourself to like look into things and to be more aware and to act on it. But other times it's really more of a by chance activity. So it's up to you, like when things will happen for you. And it's a lifelong process. It's not a one shoe or one size fits all situation. It's not like, oh, I do this today, I'm going to be a full like individual tomorrow, right? We are all learning, and at the end of the day, the more you are aware, the better things get, the quicker things progress for you. Like when I'm more aware of who I am and what I want to do with my life, things actually happen a lot faster, like career wise, like connections wise. So at the end of the day, it's really a process, but it is something that once you start, you are going to see results, some improvements. And I hope that this video is helpful for those of you who are looking for support. You can also check out my Patreon. You can check out my merch in my channel and watch other videos on the same topic. And like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I will see you in the next one. Bye.